Those who've persevered with my channel this long have been subjected to a litany of hideous, grueling, and degrading things, and I thank you for your masochistically tinged dedication. But even the most desensitized of you will still recoil at the notion, the nightmarish truth, that footage exists from the film Trainwreck of Ezra Miller and Amy Schumer having simulated sex. While you're absorbing the high-octane nightmare fuel of that pairing, consider this new trend that has emerged in the past few weeks. Transageism, a movement whose activists claim that age is a social construct. A transage person, like Lily, might have a chronological or chrono age of 30, but identifies as 6, whereas Hannah, whose chrono age is 18, identifies as 13. Based off this criteria, I supposed I identified as a 95-year-old, mostly from feeling prematurely aged by the exhausting and relentlessly shitty shenanigans of Hollywood. But I then realized I actually identify as 2.5, so debilitated by identity politics-driven, poorly scripted entertainment that I have been rendered infantilized to the point of shitting myself, gurgling, and wailing throughout the night. The latest development, pushing me closer to the state of dependency, limited motor skills, and bedazzlement at the shaking of keys, is this revelation from Variety that DC is willing to move forward with Ezra Miller as the Flash. According to the report, the fact that Miller has stayed out of trouble since he began mental health treatment last summer has reopened the door to him appearing as the Flash again in the future. Let's quickly recap what constitutes trouble. April 2020, Ezra Miller appears to choke a woman outside a bar. March 2022, Miller is charged with harassment over his alleged involvement in 2 separate incidents of disorderly conduct at a bar in Hawaii. Also March 2022, a couple filed for a temporary restraining order against Miller, alleging he burst into their bedroom, threatening the man, saying, "I will bury you and your slut wife," and stole from them. April 2022, Miller was arrested and charged with second-degree assault after reportedly throwing a chair, striking a woman in the forehead. June 2022, a couple claimed that Miller had been grooming, manipulating, and controlling their daughter from the age of 12. Also June 2022, a mother and her child were granted a temporary harassment prevention order against Miller after they alleged that the actor menaced their family one evening in their downstairs neighbor's home and acted inappropriately toward the minor. August 2022, Miller was accused of burglarizing a home, allegedly stealing several bottles of alcohol. Police said they had probable cause to charge Miller. This past summer's clusterfuck of petulant, bizarre, and unremitting legal issues led to multiple reports indicating Warner Brothers was planning to part ways with Miller for future DC films. However, this is Hollywood, and more surreally and imponderably, this is DC in the throes, convulsions, and Sturm and Drang of mass cancellations and disrupted continuity. Miller apologized for his recent behavior, saying he was struggling from complex mental health issues. Miller reportedly met with Warner Brothers Discovery executives and reaffirmed his commitment to the Flash movie, calling the Flash one of his favorite characters to play. And that was that. Miller's A-OK and good to go. I mean, come on, the Flash is one of his favorite characters to play, and that's really important. This brings me back to my initial cranky ramblings about trans and non-binary stuff, and the meaning behind the title for this video. In Hollywood, and the culture more broadly, an underprivileged upbringing and the ensuing psychological stress from marginalization mean that those coping with such circumstances can get a kind of hall pass from prevailing attitudes about consequences and judgment. Rappers are the obvious example. Rapper 50 Cent was busted in the act of selling drugs and was arrested a second time after the discovery of 2 loaded guns and allegedly attempting to attack a member of a crowd who'd hit him with a bottle, ending up with him injuring 3 women. The late DMX was jailed an estimated 30 times over the years. Tupac was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree sexual abuse, was sentenced to prison by a judge who decried an act of brutal violence against a helpless woman, was charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault after being arrested for allegedly shooting at 2 off-duty police officers, was charged with felonious assault after allegedly throwing a microphone and swinging a baseball bat at another rapper, pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor and being sentenced to 30 days in jail, and was then sentenced to a further 120 days in jail for violating his release terms after being pulled over with a semi-automatic weapon in his car. Such rappers, and others given to songs full of misogynistic language and descriptions of violent behavior, are largely given a cultural pass. The rationale being, to exclude them would be seen as a white-privileged judgment on people of color, who had grown up in an environment made underprivileged, dangerous, and desperate by systemic racism. So much of the rapper's violence and misogyny have a root cause in that systemic racism. Therefore, holding them to the usual societal norms and rules would be insensitive and only perpetuate their marginalization. Let's stress test this line of thought. I think that poverty, marginalization, and discrimination do harden people, and are drivers of desperate and antisocial behavior. I also think the main buyers of rap albums are teenage white boys, and the whole thing is really lucrative, and the record industry will overlook a whole bunch of dodgy antics, with their only real red line being anti-Semitism. Ezra Miller is the beneficiary of a similar but new paradigm. Any high-profile actor with a conventional orientation or gender identity would find their career irretrievably destroyed after the long succession of volatile, disruptive transgressions that Miller has racked up. He is being treated by an implicitly different set of standards, an inherent tolerance that allows his transgressions to be attributed, in part, to what would be considered the psychological pressures of coming to terms with troubling self-identity issues, and the internalization of society's rejection of his identity, and how he might choose to manifest it. Therefore, in this mindset, his volatile behavior is to some extent a consequence of inner pain, a lashing out due to unrecognized or unmet needs, internalized self-loathing, a lack of societal support structures, and all of this exacerbated by being played out in the glare of the public eye. In my view, the heads of DC decided at some level to allow for this, as mitigating in at least some abstracted way, either through a genuine sympathy or as a purely cynical and pragmatic way to legitimize pressing ahead with a lucrative film release, or some ambiguous murky mix of the two. Let's pause and stress test this idea too. After all, people in Miller's situation and experience no doubt undergo immense strain from reckoning with gender dysphoria and identity issues, and with struggling to find recognition and acceptance. Nah, not good enough. Ezra Miller is a grown-up. Whatever ructions are going on within him don't excuse or mitigate when it comes to transgressing on others in serious ways. It seems to me like the temptation to right the ship with an expensive property might have gotten the better of the DC execs. And the uniqueness and modern sensitivities around Miller might have subtly influenced their gamble at least a little. Ezra Miller is a puerile, histrionic prat who should never have been welcomed back into the fold. It wasn't as if DC needed him to keep the lights on. His running style is weird and retarded anyway, and it's crappy and dubious to see a star let off the hook in ways that a non-gender diverse actor wouldn't be. Empathy, fairness, and acceptance of diversity is great. But equality of opportunity also has to mean equality of consequences. Support me on Patreon. I need money or somebody I could take it from. The content of the YouTubers create is wrong. So before I head off into the great beyond, support me on Patreon, you cunts.